So, welcome everyone. As I said, my name is Gigi Naglek. I'm the Director of Programs here at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, which means I supervise all of our, what we refer to as our capacity building programs. That includes grants, that includes other award projects that include funding but are not grants, such as Community History and Humanities Lab. It includes our capacity building workshops, and sort of everything in between. I'm one of five staff, is that correct? Five staff members here at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. We are a small but mighty team. And here on this Zoom with us, I'm thrilled to introduce you all. I think you're really the first ones, at least in a Zoom room, who have the great opportunity to meet our brand new Grants and Partnerships Coordinator, Sylvester Cruz. Sylvester, do you want to say hi?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for teeing me up there, Gigi. It's really nice to get to meet all of you. Like Gigi just said, I'm the freshly minted Grants and Partnerships Coordinator here at NJCH, and I'm super excited to offer you guys support throughout this application process and just to learn more about the incredible work that you guys do for the people of the Garden State here. So, really excited to get to work.
Awesome. Well, Sylvester has great experience himself as a humanities practitioner and is also a PhD candidate at Rutgers. Um, so I'm thrilled for all of you to meet Sylvester. We are the two people who you're going to hear the most from throughout not just this webinar, but the entire application process. And we are your primary contacts if you have questions throughout the process or after you've received a grant. We're the ones who work most closely on the grants program. The New Jersey Council for the Humanities, for any of you who are not familiar, is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Contrary to one of the most commonly misunderstood pieces of NJCH is that we are a state agency, and we are not. We actually really are not. We're independent 501c3. We are, however, a state level partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. We are one of 56 state and jurisdictional humanities councils in the United States, and obviously the best of those 56. I think that goes without saying. Our grants that we give out each year are re-grants of federal funds that come through the National Endowment for the Humanities, and as such are subject to certain restrictions that are placed on those funds either by the federal government or by NEH itself. We really endeavor to eliminate as many barriers as humanly possible for applicants and for those who receive awards, but unfortunately there are some that we just simply cannot eliminate as barriers. So we are always here to help you through the process of applying for and administering your NJCH grant should you receive one. Our agenda for today is to go over the grants process really through the whole application process from the very beginning straight through to the end. We're going to be talking about eligibility, who can apply, what kinds of things we fund and do not fund, the difference between action grants and incubation grants, how you can get started, and then go over some important considerations, dates, resources that are available for you. As I said, we'll be taking breaks throughout to make sure you are we're on track with everything and we're answering the questions that you need to have answered. I want to be also very, very clear that absolutely nothing I'm saying today is something that you can't get elsewhere. We will, however, be posting this recording in addition on our website after. It'll be there later today or tomorrow, depending on how quickly Zoom gives us the downloadable file. Everything is written down in our grant guidelines on our website, and also in the downloadable PDFs that exist on our website that go through all the guidelines and information themselves. So you can always access this information. And in fact, our website is often the absolute best place to find answers to questions that you have about the applications. So without further ado, who can apply for an NJCH grant? Well, I hope all of you. In a very basic way, this is sort of our basic eligibility guidelines. You need to be a New Jersey-based nonprofit or government agency or entity. You do not have to be a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can be an institution that is formed for nonprofit purposes, but do not have a 501c3. And when we say government agency, again, that relates to a lot of different kinds of organizations. For example, municipal libraries and schools often fit under that government agency. If you have questions about your eligibility, definitely take a look or ask us these questions now. New Jersey based is critical. You have to be working in New Jersey. Your physical address has to be in New Jersey and doing your work for the benefit of New Jersey audiences. That is your focus. It needs to be your focus. One of the things I want to bring up early and often is a relatively new requirement, which is the Unique Entity Identifier, the UEI. For those of you who may have some experience applying for federal grants in the past, there used to be a requirement for a DUNS number. The UEI replaces the DUNS number. It is, in theory, at the very least, a simple number to receive. You should have already got one if you already had a DUNS number, in fact. But your UEI you can apply for at sam.gov. SAM is the System for Award Management. It is the entity through which you apply for federal awards in most cases, especially the bigger ones, and where you manage how you learn about these awards. A UEI is required for anyone receiving an award from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, as well as any other state humanities council. So you have to go on to sam.gov, sam.gov, to apply for one if you do not already have them. There is also the possibility of including a full sam.gov registration process, which makes you eligible to apply for more awards. I want to be very clear. While it is something that may benefit you, it is not required, and it's a much more involved process. sam.gov offers a lot of resources for helping you apply for your UEI or completing your application, your full application to sam.gov. But if you have difficulty with this, please do let us know and we will do our very best to help you. I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you start this process now. Unfortunately, the whole process of assigning UEIs, and especially if there are hiccups along the way, can take some time. In a lot of cases, people get this within a day, within a week or two. In certain cases, it has taken many weeks and even months to get all of the situations, the issues ironed out, to get people their UEI. And we cannot make an award if you do not have a verifiable UEI. So get started now. For academic institutions, this is very important, and that includes K through 12, that includes higher education. We do need to see that your project is engaging with the community beyond just the school entity. For it to be a competitive project, I want to make sure that's very clear up front. And there are some restrictions. For example, we do not fund scholarships. We do not fund for-credit coursework. So there are some restrictions about this that we'll get into a little bit more and are, of course, explained in much greater detail on the website. I do also want to be very clear that you do not have to have a mission in the humanities in your organization to apply for an NJCH grant. Our grants are project grants. And you may be doing humanities work, even if you are an institution that has a mission in the arts or social service or something else entirely. And that actually kind of brings us to our next slide, which is, what do we fund? We fund the planning and implementation of public humanities projects. That seems so simple, and yet there's a bunch of different words in there that actually kind of trip people up a little bit. So first of all, let's talk about what the humanities are. It's a difficult word. The way we sort of make a shorthand for it is our history, values, culture, and beliefs, right? It is how we document and think about and research and talk about the human experience. Subjects in the humanities include those like history, literature, philosophy, ethics, jurisprudence. I love mentioning a few of those really unusual ones: rhetoric, linguistics, language. These are all subjects in the humanities. I like to also talk about practices of the humanities. These are a little more diffuse, but nonetheless really critical to humanities-based work. That includes topics like oral history, critical thinking, the analysis of texts. And I'm using the word text here very broadly. Something like analysis of paintings, we would include under a text. The history of art, for example, is a humanities discipline. Inquiry, very broadly, interpretation, very broadly, and dialogue. These are all humanities-centered practices. And then, of course, we talk a lot about public humanities. The public humanities very simply make the humanities accessible to broad public audiences. As I mentioned, we do not fund programs that are aimed exclusively at scholarly audiences. We also do not fund personal research projects. Those are all funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities directly, among other funders. And here at NJCH, we have a particular priority to fund work that targets that prioritizes populations that do not have easy access to humanities programs and or do not have a voice in humanities discourse, what we refer to as underserved or underrepresented populations. And you do have the opportunity within our grants process to describe how you think about underserved and underrepresented populations, since it is very, very specific to particular communities. The most difficult part of the humanities is that it is an incredibly broad umbrella, and a lot of different things can fit under the humanities, depending in particular on how they're framed. There are a lot of gray areas, and we have to make some judgment calls. And unfortunately, it's not super easy to make those judgment calls. One of those main areas, though, that comes up a lot is the arts and the humanities, meaning in particular, the visual arts, performing arts, and literary arts. These are disciplines where there is humanistic parts of it, and then there's exclusively artistic part. For a proposal to be within the arts to be competitive for the New Jersey Council for the Humanities, its primary focus must be on that humanistic piece of it. If the primary focus of your project is on the creation or performance of art, that project may not be eligible, period, and certainly would not be competitive within our grants program. So what is humanistic inquiry? That's really important. We're looking at there being a critical or analytical component of this artistic work. Projects that place art within their social or historical context are a great example of a humanities program. Sometimes another way of thinking about this is, while we wouldn't fund the creation, that like making a painting, we would fund hanging it on a wall and putting some text around it within an exhibit. We often fund art exhibits, for example. Some questions that can help you in thinking about whether your arts focused project really engages with the humanities is, how does this project utilize artistic components to help participants or audience members explore humanities concepts, right? Can we look at history through art? Can we understand a culture through dance, through theater, etc.? And again, does your project engage with humanities ideas and concepts through artistic work, not exclusively for the creation of primary work, but actually the analysis of it? I hope that helps provide some general guidelines around this. We are always happy to talk about this in a more specific way related to your project through a one-on-one meeting. Similar considerations also apply to other non-humanities missioned organizations. For example, if you're a social service organization, you may want to look at, is this really engaging with the humanities, or is this about humanitarian work? That's another big area. While humanitarian work is obviously extremely important, things like food security and emergency services are not things that we fund. Okay. Hey, look, That's exactly what I'm talking about now. These are some of the examples of very specific types of work that we do not fund. And this is not a comprehensive list, by the way. There's actually a more a longer list that goes into a little more detail about this. These are just the ones we see most often. Humanitarian aid and social services are not something that we fund. Self-help, wellness, health, fitness programs, we do not fund. Grants, scholarships, prizes, and awards, we do not fund. Direct political action and social advocacy. That is worth discussing in more detail if your project relates to this. We are specifically, when we say direct political action, that is not to say we wouldn't fund a project that says, conservation of the earth is good. That's not direct social and political advocacy. What we would not fund is lobbying, and even a campaign to ask people to support a particular piece of legislation or a particular political figure. That is definitely not allowed as part of any of our funding. And projects that do not engage with the humanities. It sounds pretty simple, but it can be a little bit of a tricky area. Something that benefits humanity, does not automatically equal a humanities project. Education is not automatically a humanities discipline. This is one of the most common problems we see. Well, this is educational. Okay, I can learn how to do math. That has nothing to do with the humanities. Social justice and DEI are not automatically humanities based. Again, if you're taking a humanities approach to these questions, they absolutely are. They're just not automatically signifiers of humanities work. We already talked a lot about arts-based projects that do not engage with the humanities, and I want to just reinforce again, there's a lot more detail about this in the full grants guidelines. So, coming into those grants, I want to actually, before we do this, I want to take a moment and check in to see how we're doing, see if anybody has any questions. I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now, but you are welcome to unmute yourself, and I'm going to take a sip of tea to wet my whistle while you're doing it. Okay. Hearing nothing at present, I will continue, but please do not hesitate to jump in with questions as we take these little breaks. Okay. So we have two types of grants here at NJCH, incubation grants and action grants. You determine whether you are applying for an incubation grant or an action grant based on what stage your project is at. Incubation grants support the development or reimagining of projects. Action grants, implementation or expansion of projects. In neither case does it have to be a new project. You may be rethinking an old project. You may be expanding on something that you've already started. All of those things are fine. Newness is not necessarily a benefit and certainly not a requirement to apply for a project grant here at NJCH. You cannot, however, apply for both. So you could not put in an application for an incubation grant and an action grant and see which one you might get. Sorry, got to apply for one or the other. However, if it turns out you need to switch, if you're as you're going through the application and you're suddenly saying like, oh, you know what, I thought this was an incubation grant, but actually we're really much more of what we need is going to be about implementation, and we're really going to get there, and that's going to be most of the project. We can switch you from an incubation grant to an action grant after you have submitted your LOI. It's not a problem. So just to get a little bit more detail into these, an incubation grant includes research, planning, development of a project. It can include things like formative and front-end evaluation. If you still have a lot of questions about your project, even including whether or not this project is viable or could really exist, this is a great type of grant to do. This is all about planning and development. The anticipation in an incubation grant is that things may and should, if they need to, change along the way. That's fine. Failure is an option in an incubation grant. Absolutely. You may decide at the end of your planning and development period that this is a terrible idea. And actually, you don't want to move forward on it. You want to do something else instead. Great, successful incubation grant. Action grants are, on the other hand, are all about implementation. So, and these I think are what people think of in their heads most of the time when they think about grants. If you know what you're doing, most, if not all, of the key components of your project have been identified. You know what, you have a project plan, your key project team has been assembled, contributors to your project have been identified. You are probably at an action grant stage. This can include pilot projects. Being new does not necessarily make it an incubation grant automatically. It's really only if you have significant planning to do. Now, I'm going to admit fully right here that most projects contain a certain amount of incubation and a certain amount of action, a certain amount of planning and development, and a certain amount of implementation. That's totally fine. That's totally normal. Take a look at your project and see where the biggest amount of work is to do. If you know that you have, if you're thinking about a 6-month project, if 4 of those months are going to be about planning and development, and then you're going to have a little version of it at the very end, that is an incubation grant. The majority of your time, the majority of your work is going to be on planning and development. On the other hand, if you do still have a few questions to answer, you're going to have this program, you're not sure where it's going to be, you're still figuring out the dates, it's a series, you've got 3 speakers, but you need 2 more. This is still an action grant. Yes, you have a little bit of work left to do to sort of secure those last minute, those last little questions related to the implementation, but it's really about implementation. It's about doing the thing that you have already, by and large, planned. So I hope that helps to clarify a little bit of the difference between an incubation grant and an action grant. If you're not sure, this is a great question to bring to us. This is one of the circumstances. Usually we advise you to submit your LOI and then talk to us. This is one of the circumstances where you may actually want to talk to us in advance of submitting an LOI. Anybody have any immediate questions about incubation versus action grants before I move on to how you get started?
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Of course, go ahead. Hi.
Thank you. My name is Veysel. You can. From the Turkish Cultural Center. So the letter of interest are not required, or is it required before the application?
It is a requirement. I'm actually going to get to that next. The LOI is part of the application process. It's not a separate letter, to be clear. It's a brief form that you'll fill out. That's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure. Hi, Chatrugan. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm good. I was trying to reach you a couple of times. Last week, you were on vacation.
I was, and I just got back. I actually had it on my list to call you today. Sorry about that.
Twice, and then I tried to reach you to get a guideline and about my project, which is in my mind to apply. I was thinking to apply for the project, which is kind of loneliness. Loneliness, that thing, which Surgeon General of US say that it causes dementia, it causes other stress, and other things. So is a kind of pandemic, is a loneliness pandemic. So that is the one thing in my mind, and the other thing is the critical and analytical thinking.
Yes.
So is this so I just what you need your opinion and the guidance to what project I should pick and choose.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. That's a great example. And like I said, I have it on my list to give you a call back later today. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I sent you email yesterday also. I called
good.
2 times.
Great.
Yes, I called 2 times. Your office number and your cell number also with a 215.
Yep, you got it. So I'll get back to you about your projects, but more broadly for everybody here, This is one of the ways that we support applicants throughout the process, is scheduling a one-on-one meeting with us to discuss aspects of either your project's development or specific questions related to the application. We also offer review of a draft of your proposal, of your application itself. So that's something I always recommend. So thank you for that, bringing that up as well. Michael, you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, I do. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. I have a quick question. I work with New Jersey Future, a statewide nonprofit. We have we have interest areas across the state and obviously look at issues in every municipality. Our general concept, at least at this stage now, is a little bit about oral history or raising community perspectives as they relate to state policy priorities that we have and we champion. And I think that I really appreciated this section of the presentation because I think that we're between incubation and maybe action. And I just wanted you've already offered a one-on-one, which I think I'd like to accept, but yeah, is there any other pieces of guidelines or rules of the road that applicants should have in mind while we would navigate that? Because I think that you're raising a really good safety valve. You can switch between LOI and your application, but I think that this is probably one of the main things, aside from describing the project, that's going to be a challenge for us in the next few weeks. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. This is, I think, the hardest thing about applying for our grants, to be perfectly honest. So especially as a new applicant, and especially in a project that sort of hits in between and includes both of them, I can't emphasize enough that I really advise you to submit your LOI early, to schedule a one-on-one, and or participate in draft review. We have fixed this. We have come through and said, even at an LOI stage, we've said, yeah, that sounds like an action grant. That's great. And then we get to we're reading through somebody's application and we're like, whoa, actually, no, not at all. You'd be much more competitive as an incubation grant. So this is an area where using the very specific information that you can give us about your project, we can better identify. I can also say it has come up I think it probably at least once in every round that I've done for the last almost 8 years, where the evaluators, the grants evaluators, have looked at a particular proposal and said, I know they applied for an incubation grant, but this really feels more like an action grant, and decided to fund the project anyway. And then we had a conversation afterward and said, we think we're going to fund you as an action grant, that it would make more sense to do that. So it is very rarely something that will stop your application from getting funding. And yet at the same time, we want to make sure you're going to put your best foot forward, and you're going to do that by being in the right lane, so to speak. Absolutely.
That's great, because yeah, we definitely, part of the appeal was the incubation grant left you like at a half step into getting into a program, and intended to maybe follow up with that for the second cycle. So I look forward to that. And point taken of start your LOI early and submit early. Thank you.
Please do. Please do. LOIs are easy to fix, and they are non-competitive, which actually brings me perfectly to what we're talking about now. Thank you so much. What a lovely transition you gave me there, Michael. Much appreciated. So I want to just talk a little bit about how you're going to get started in the process, the application process. Can't emphasize enough. Our guidelines are available at njhumanities.org/grants. Also, if you go to the homepage of our website, there's a section called Grants. Go to Grants Overview. You can navigate through the pages, or you can download, if it is preferable to you, you can download a PDF of those requirements. You can also download a PDF of the LOI form and the application form if you want to just look at it before you start applying and start thinking about your answers to your questions. The application portal itself is actually off of our website. We use a system called Foundant, which is wonderful, and you can always access it through njhumanities.org/portal. So those are easy ways to get it. Your first step, of course, is I'm sorry, before I don't mention this from the website. When you're on the website, the grants overview page has information that it pertains to all of our grants, either incubation or action. And then as you scroll down on the page, you can see a section about incubation grants and a section about action grants. So the information is largely the same. The process is very much the same, but of course, questions can be slightly different and considerations that you're making can be slightly different at a planning and development stage versus at an implementation stage. So do make sure you read all of the materials that relate to the specific grant type that you're applying to. At the bottom of each of those pages is a link that says, it's a big yellow button and it says apply here. That will take you directly to the application site, which is also at njhumanities.org/portal. We do recommend that you bookmark that site. You'll be going back to it often, not only through the application process, but also if you receive a grant, it's where you get your grant award, your grant agreement, all of the follow-up forms, your reporting forms that are required as part of this. There's a lot of information about the types of projects that are eligible for an incubation grant versus an action grant that can really be helpful in identifying which area your project will fit into. Again, not an exhaustive list. I think that would be impossible. It would be 97 pages long. So it's not an exhaustive list, but hopefully it helps to inspire your thinking on those areas. The LOI is the first step. It's a letter of intent. It is, as I said, not a letter itself. You don't send me a separate letter. It is simply a form that you fill out that gives us some basic information about your project as well as your organization. Your LOI is evaluating only eligibility at this point. We're looking for determining that your organization is eligible to apply. So all of that stuff I talked about at the beginning. Are you based in New Jersey? Is your project for New Jersey audiences? Are you formed for nonprofits purposes? All of those things we're going to be verifying through your LOI. And then the last little bit that we're looking at through the brief project description is just, do we see something of the humanities in this project? So, as the case has happened in the past, when we received an LOI from an organization looking to buy first aid kits for a volunteer fire company, that is not an eligible project. And we included the LOI process to make sure that they only had to write one paragraph, not 10 pages worth of information for a project that was not eligible. So that's what we're looking at there. Nearly all nearly all LOIs are approved to submit an application. It is not. The people who look at it are me and Sylvester. That's it. Similarly, having a successful LOI does not suggest that you are definitely going to be funded. So that's also important to remember. And Sylvester has put the information about where you can get our PDFs of the grant guidelines here as well into the chat. Okay. So read those guidelines, take a look, and start your LOI. We strongly recommend that you submit the LOI early to leave plenty of time for discussion. A few more important considerations as you're thinking about the project that you wish to submit for a grant is that these are project grants, not general operating support. So there has to be a project, a defined project that we are looking to fund. This is actually one of those things that is a restriction we have from the National Endowment for the Humanities. We cannot provide general operating support. It is can be a little tricky to demarcate between general operating support and a project grant for a very small organization, particularly volunteer-driven organizations. Often your general operations are your projects. That is normal. And then the next piece of that would be, determining sort of the scope of a project within the work that your organization is doing. This is an area where we can certainly help. I also can't emphasize enough, we have another workshop coming up. We have two more workshops, in fact, coming up about called Creating an Outstanding Proposal. The first half of which is about narratives and the second half of which is about budgets. And how your narrative and how your budget can help define the scope of a project can be really, really helpful. So especially if you're a new applicant, I strongly recommend attending those webinars or watching the recordings afterward or having a one-on-one or draft review with us. We do have a matching funds requirement for our grants. This is another requirement from NEH. The one-to-ones matching requirement is any combination of cash and in-kind support. So if you are applying for $5,000 from NJCH, you need to show $5,000 worth of funding that you are matching. When I say any combination of cash and in-kind, it may be that some of that money is actual cash. It's coming out of your general operating support funds. It's coming out of another grant. Any grant except an NEH grant can be used as part of your match. It's coming from your individual donors. It can come from anyone, really. That's a cash match. So any pieces of your grant project that are paid for with funds other than NJCH's funds is your cash match. In-kind match is the value of any volunteer time or donated goods or services. I'm going to get into a lot of detail about this in the budget section and in the budget workshop in creating an outstanding proposal budget, talking about matching and how you determine matching. There's also a lot of information about it on the website. In almost all cases, the reason why organizations have difficulty making the one-to-one match, particularly small volunteer-driven organizations, is that they have undervalued the volunteer time, particularly the volunteer time. $10 an hour is never the value of volunteer time in the state of New Jersey, and we can offer you resources, we have them linked on our website, to help you determine the value of people's volunteer time. Hint, it's around $30 an hour in New Jersey for basic volunteer work. Project period is another important consideration because it affects when you apply for grant funding. Your project period is the time during which you will be spending your money, incurring your expenses related to your project. If you are applying in this round, your project must start between January 1st, 2024 and March 30th, 2024, within 3 months of your award is what it is for us. And you have up to 1 year to spend out your funds. So if your project begins on January 15th, you have until January 14th of 2025 to spend out your funds. If your project is actually only going to take 6 months, that's absolutely fine, no problem. You would make your project period from January 15th to June 15th, or whatever works for you. You determine those days, those exact, within that parameter, you determine the exact beginning and end of your project. It's particularly important because you cannot incur any expenses for either your NJCH funding or your match funding before the grant period begins or after it ends. So that's really important in thinking about when are we really going to have the expenses that we need for our grant project. If you know that your project is not going to start until next summer, don't apply in this round. I strongly recommend that you don't. I strongly recommend that you wait until the spring when your projects can begin between July 1st and September 30th. If you have any questions about your specific project, we're always happy to answer them by email or in a meeting or phone call. And finally, your project team. These are the people who are working on your grant project. We would, to have a competitive proposal, we need to see evidence of humanities expertise within your project team, that what we call a humanities scholar. We just use the word scholar very, very broadly. Certainly PhD, a professor is a very typical humanities scholar, but there's lots of people who are not professors or do not have PhDs who are humanities scholars. Myself, for example, I do not have a PhD. I have a master's degree and 20 years of experience doing public history work. I would count as a humanities scholar. Elders within your community who are considered knowledge bearers are considered humanities scholars for our purposes. We have a lot of information about this on our website about what is a humanities scholar. And these people, by the way, may be internal to your organization, external, they may be volunteers, they may be paid. There's lots of different ways to do this. We do, however, want to see that significant appropriate humanities expertise within your project team. I'm going to take a little pause here because I'm already seeing some chat chats here, but also I want to offer the opportunity for anyone to ask a question about some of the stuff that I've been talking about, if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you again for great explanations. I always needed to educate myself on what is humanities. So
Yes.
this was very helpful for me. So you talked about one-on-one meetings. How can we schedule that so that we can ask you questions about our projects? Because I need to make sure it fits humanities.
So there's a couple of different ways we can do that, and I'm actually going to get to it in just a moment. So I'm going to pause on your question, but I promise we're coming back to it. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure, of course. No problem. I want to also mention grants are not the only way to get support from the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. We have a number of other projects that offer both funding and learning around the humanities. We have two programs that are both learning and award based. One is community history, which is specifically teaching organizations that are not history based or maybe are history missioned but have no professional staff related to them, such as a small historical society or a small museum. How to do community engaged public history. And it also includes an award to pilot a project, an award of next year it will be $5,000 to pilot a project, a history-based project within your community. So that type of learning, there's a significant time commitment involved in community history. So I do want to be very upfront about that. It requires a monthly meeting to do part of the learning over several months prior to receiving your funding to pilot your project. But if you are interested in exploring your community's history and don't necessarily know how to approach that work, that's a great option. That is definitely something that you should consider. Many of our community history programs, we launched that program in 2021 and have had 4 cohorts so far. Many of our community history participants have gone on to apply for and receive grant funding to continue or expand their projects as well. Community history new guidelines and application will become available in November of 2023. So the information that we have that is up there right now is from last year, but it can still give you a flavor for the program. New information will be available this fall. Humanities Lab is an even newer program that we just kicked off, but it has a similar vibe to community history, just not for history specifically, but the humanities more broadly. This is really, we're leaning in heavy on the lab idea. Humanities Lab is a place for experimentation and learning around creative humanities projects. So we learn from others in the field who are doing humanities-based work and think about how we can take some of that learning and apply it to our own work within our own institutions. Again, like community history, at the end of the program, you can receive a guarantee of up to $5,000 to support a pilot project that you develop during the lab. So both of those programs are, it is a lightly competitive, significantly less competitive process in the application to be part of the program. We're not able to accept everyone into the program every year, but we do accept the majority of applicants. We have in the past been able to accept the majority of applicants. And once you are in the program, the funding is guaranteed. So you don't have to apply again for those grants. We also have sponsorships. If your project is, a one-off program or smaller in scale that makes a grant sort of unnecessary, and you have a way of also prominently featuring the fact that your funding came from New Jersey Council for the Humanities, sponsorships may be another opportunity for you to get funding without the sort of cumbersome administrative requirements of a grant application and administrative process. Information about our sponsorships are on our website, and that process is rolling. so you can apply anytime throughout the year for a sponsorship. njhumanities.org is our website. All of this information is available there. I'm gonna stop talking for a minute and see if anyone has any questions. And Sylvester is putting great stuff in the chat, all the links to everything that I've been talking about. Thank you, Sylvester, for putting all that in there. But if anybody has any questions about these other programs, I'm happy to answer them now too.
Gigi, I have one question. For prospective grantees, is it one or the other? Or if someone is awarded a grant, can they also then apply for the Humanities Lab if they're interested?
Yeah, that is an excellent question, Kristen. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I feel silly that I didn't mention this. It is one or the other in the end. However, because I think this year we managed to work it out that none of the applications overlap. So you might, for example, discover, or you might apply for a grant in this round and you don't get the grant, and decide that actually you might benefit from applying for community history or applying to Humanities Lab to develop your project more. So that's an alternative option. It is also something that one of the things we do for organizations that do not receive grants is we offer the opportunity to get feedback about what what considerations were being made in that in determining the award or decline. And sometimes we will specifically say, really, it doesn't seem like you're quite ready to do this. You might want to consider community history. This is a history-based project. Or you might want to consider Humanities Lab to help you have a facilitated development process.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Absolutely. Important dates to keep in mind. Our LOI period continues through this month. Submit your LOI right away. Draft review deadline, if you wish to submit a draft for review, you need to do that by October 11th so that we can get our comments back to you ahead of the draft of the final deadline, which is on October 17th at 11:59 p.m. My wish for you always is that you are not still doing your grant application at 11:59 p.m. on October 17th. You'll know if you received an award by the end of the year. We say December 31st. I can tell you, I don't want to be working on December 31st. So I'm going to get those award notifications out to you early. I'm sure Sylvester doesn't want to be working on December 31st either. So it'll probably be more like December 20th. And your projects can begin between January 1st and March 30th. We have a lot of resources that we can offer to you. Our Creating an Outstanding Proposal workshops are coming up. We've divided them this year into narrative and budget. You can attend one, you can attend both, you can attend one and listen to the recording on another, as you wish. I strongly recommend the budget one in particular, particularly if you find budgets to be a little confounding. Budgets are often where grants run into, most often a place where grants run into problems. Similarly, if you're going to submit a draft for a review, we really recommend that you submit a budget along with your narrative. People can do an absolutely spectacular job on their narrative, and then the budget is such a mess that people can't understand where the funding is going to be spent, and the grant award doesn't happen, even if the idea is fantastic. And then I want to also point to Resource Roundup. This is a monthly newsletter with funding and professional development opportunities, job opportunities as well, in the humanities that we send out every month. If you have applied for anything with us or worked with us in any capacity, you probably already get that email. But if not, you can sign up for it on our website. And if you apply for a grant, you will be automatically signed up for it. And you can, of course, unsubscribe to it at any time. But I strongly recommend it. One-on-one meetings is something I have mentioned. Meetings, one-on-ones take place with me and or Sylvester. You will have a link when you submit your LOI. You will have a link to we use Calendly to do to schedule the meetings because it makes it easier than exchanging 25 emails. You'll get a Calendly link with your LOI approval note to be able to set up a one-on-one with us. It's one of the reasons why we recommend applying for an LOI early. so that you have plenty of time to schedule that, and not all the slots don't all get swallowed up in advance. We do recommend submitting your LOI first and then reaching out to us about a one-on-one. However, there are circumstances where it makes more sense to talk sooner, in which case, please drop us an email at grants@njhumanities.org and say, I'd really like to schedule a meeting to talk with you too. And we will say, sure, here's the Calendly link. Very easy. Emails to grants@njhumanities.org go to me and to Sylvester, so whoever sees them first will get back to you quickly. It's usually the fastest way to get an answer. However, we do both, of course, have phone numbers, which are here and are also available on our website. Do give us a call. I have a lot of meetings this week, as it turns out, but next week is much better, so you're more likely to grab us on the phone. And often a quick phone call can give you a quick answer, whereas a longer, it's hard for us to necessarily interrupt our days for half an hour for a longer term chat. We may ask you to schedule something with us. njhumanities.org/grants is available 24/7 and has so much information that most of your questions can be answered there. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and take any questions that you have now.
So in the LOI, we have to describe our project, title of our project.
Yes.
But
a very brief description. I think we give you something like 500 characters. I'm not kidding when I say 30 words usually does it. 20 words. Often we can tell just by the title. No problem.
Oh, okay. But but in the workshop, you will guide us to create an outstanding proposal.
That is once your LOI has been approved. We particularly recommend that workshop. Yes.
Oh, okay.
But also, Shatrughn, I'm already going to reach out to you about scheduling a time for us to talk, since you wanted to talk sooner.
Okay.
That's no problem.
Thank you.
No problem.
Because I have put one coordinator also with me, and I sent you an email to add her name.
Yep, I got it.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
She must be attending this. I don't know.
Yes, I am.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great to meet you. I'm so sorry. I was on vacation and I'm still getting through emails. I apologize.
No worries at all. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Well, if there are no further questions, I'm going to actually go ahead and stop this recording. And